Hello everyone, I am in the 8mm Mauser Man backyard. I was really excited when this came out because I already had a TLR1 and I really like it. And I've been wanting to get another one, or maybe a couple others, to put on some various guns. And I wasn't able to, primarily because of price. They're a little bit expensive. However, these came out and they're 50 bucks brand new at Harbor Freight. So I thought it would be good to buy one and test it for you guys to see if it was the right decision for you and if it was the right decision for me along the way. So I did do a little bit of shooting with this light on some different guns, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. However, first let's just talk about some of the things that I noticed when I first pulled it out of the box. Number one, it does have a slightly wider beam than an actual TLR1. For some people it's really important that a flashlight has the right tone, the right amount of white, the right amount of yellow, etc. That's never really been something that's been that important to me. I've found a weapon-mounted light that's bright is good enough for my uses. Sadly, out at the range, my TLR1's batteries were low, so I couldn't really compare them side by side fairly. But I do have some footage comparing it, and I will splice that in right here. The t-shirt wearing person is at about 10 yards, and the corn behind it is at about 20 yards past that, so 30 yards right now. This is the TLR1, and this is the Braun Light. The target is now at 25 yards and the corn is at 45. TLR1, Braun. TLR1, Braun. The target is now at 50 yards and the cornfield is at about 70. Here is the TLR1. And here's the Braun Light. Do both side by side. TLR1 on your left, and Braun on your right. Honestly, they look almost identical to me. Now, it does feel cheaper than a TLR1, but not significantly so. Functionally, this is an exact clone of the TLR1. It does fit in the same holsters. However, there are some slight dimensional differences in different areas. Number one, the actual TLR1 is 3.3 ounces, and the Braun Light is 2.9 ounces. Personally, in my opinion, 0.4 ounces isn't enough to make a difference there. However, it could also mean that they use some lower quality materials because it's lighter. Number two, and this one actually is significant, the real TLR1 has a dimension right here, a width of 1.434 inches. And the Braun Light has a width of 1.6 inches. So I have two holsters right here. So showing you with the TLR1, this is what I have hooked up for the TLR1, so it holds in tight. But because it's a little bit thinner, when I try to put the Braun Light inside of here, it's pretty stiff going in and out. I adjusted the mutant so that it is really good to fit on the Braun Light. Fits in there perfect. Exactly like it's supposed to. However, when I use it with the TLR1, it does not have enough retention. These lights are similar, but they are not exactly the same. The next thing I noticed is that the Braun Light, the switch is just a little bit stiffer to turn it on. Honestly, when I brought the Braun Light out to the range, having used the TLR1 a lot, I really didn't notice it when doing practical shooting, when doing different drills and that kind of thing. I really only noticed when I was comparing the two side by side directly. Now, the other thing about the switch is that on the Braun Light, the strobe is a little bit easier to activate. So the TLR1, the way that the strobe works is when you double click the strobe, it is going to activate. On the Braun, the timer for the strobe was a little bit more generous. So it was a lot easier to flip it and then flip it again after, a quarter of a second or so, and then start it strobing. That's personally something that I really don't like. I'm using a light so that I can see things, and yes, while a strobe will be disorienting for the opponent if there is a two-way live fire situation, it's also disorienting for me, the person that's using it. So I would rather just have a light that has momentary and constant on. I do not want a strobe. Okay, now let's talk about my time on the range. So I did three different things. Number one, I had just gotten this M&P 2.0, so I fired about 160 rounds through this M&P 2.0 with the Braun Light attached Absolutely no issues. Nothing came up that caused alarm. It wasn't blinking when I would shoot. It was staying on the whole time. It didn't have any durability issues. I wasn't having any problems whatsoever. Then I also wanted to shoot it on my AR pistol here. This is an 11.5-inch Bushmaster upper, and it did wonderful there too. Absolutely no problems. For a pistol light, this is doing an exceptional job. In fact, I believe it's doing the exact same job that a TLR1 would do. Okay, after that, I did want to do a little bit of, quote-unquote durability testing, so I attached it to my Mossberg 500. This is a 20-gauge Mossberg 500, so that's a little less than a 12-gauge. I shot 100 rounds through it, and again, no issues to report whatsoever. It was incredibly boring, minus the fact that I was shooting 100 rounds through a Mossberg 500. I did do a little bit of water testing with these two lights. I just dropped them in water, and surprisingly, the Braun Light did not let in water. The TLR1 did let water into the battery compartment. I have a theory for what's going on there. On both of these lights, the little rubber seal sticks out a little bit, and when you are holstering and unholstering and then reholstering and unholstering over and over again, you are rubbing that rubber part. I think on my TLR1 that I've had for longer, I've just rubbed that rubber part a little bit more so that it could let in some water. The Braun Light was brand new, so I didn't have that problem. Finally, I didn't have it mounted at the time, but I did drop the Braun a few times in my garage floor from about 5 to 6 feet, and I didn't have any issues with it breaking. Yeah, that wasn't a super tough test, but it was just kind of an initial, is this a piece of junk that's going to break the first time you drop it? So what are my takeaways from all this? In my opinion, it seems durable enough for use. Hi, while I was editing this part, I realized there were some things that I wanted to change what I said. So, well, I have about 350 rounds through this flashlight so far. Simply put, I cannot in good conscience recommend that you trust it with your life. Well, yes, it is true that it has been 100% reliable for me so far, and the only major issue I've had is the strobe problem that I mentioned earlier. I just don't feel comfortable saying you should trust your life with this yet because it hasn't been tested enough. I personally haven't tested it enough to say that, and in the case of a TLR1, I don't think I've tested that enough necessarily to say that you should trust your life to it, although I have tested it significantly more. But it has been tested by other civilians as well as different law enforcement agencies around the US. But as it stands right now, what I would say about the Braun Light is, so far, it has been very reliable for me. That being said, it doesn't have enough of a track record yet to say that that will continue. Number 2. I was excited for this light. One of the things I was really excited for was that if I bought other pistols in the future, I could have my holsters set up for my TLR1 on my primary carry gun, and then I could put this Braun Light on those guns and then use them in all of these holsters. In my opinion, you could do that, but I don't think it would really be convenient to do. Because those dimensions are just slightly different, it's going to hang up in some holsters, and if you set them up to work really well with the Braun Light, they're probably not going to work as well with your TLR1. But it is still something you can do. It's just going to be a little bit stiff when you put it in your holsters set up for TLR1s. Personally, I am still going to carry the TLR1 because I just trust it a little bit more. It is more expensive. It's coming from a more reputable company. Everybody knows that Streamlight makes pretty decent stuff. So if you are going to trust a gun with your life, I think the TLR1 would be a better choice. However, I think one option is backup guns, especially since it is just a couple screw turns away from having it really convenient with your TLR1 equipped holster. Another option might be a competition gun or the like. A lot of people will use TLR1s on their competition gun because they're big and heavy. Another option might be a 22 that's not necessarily your primary defensive gun, but that you want to be able to stick in a holster and take with you wherever you're going. In addition to that, just putting weird guns in universal holsters. I don't know if that's an everybody problem thing or if that's just a YouTuber thing, but if you're like me, sometimes you are scrolling through the Cabela's used gun online website and you see some weird gun that was in production for a year and a half because nobody bought it, and you think, yeah, that'd be kind of cool to own. It's $200, but where am I going to find a holster for it? This might be your solution. And finally, there's one other thing I'd like to note. I have a lot of long guns. So right here I have in front of me a Mini 14, my 11.5, this 20 gauge shotgun. I would really like to have lights on every single one of these guns, but frankly, right now I don't. And one big reason for that is because lights are expensive. So instead of buying one TLR1, I could get 3 of these. Each of these guns gets a light. If you're in a position where you just can't afford to buy a TLR1, this might be suitable for you, but I would still recommend spending a little bit more money, getting a little bit more peace of mind with your equipment, and getting something that's made by a more reputable company that has a reputation to uphold with their quality control. All of that being said, I am 8mm Mauser Man, and I bought the Harbor Freight TLR1, but I lived up.
You be the judge. That was way more explosion than I expected. Keep the change, you filthy animal.